This meeting is being recorded.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the fascinating Paul Pearson interview. So I guess I should say hello again, Paul, even though we only just finished part 1, but for the sake of appearing or whatever. So in part 1, we had a fascinating discussion, and it was all about your upbringing, about kind of being introduced to witchcraft via this Barbara lady, and to pagan practice working on a farm in Cheshire. And at the end point there, we were just talking about magic and kind of where I was kind of asking you about was the kind of supernatural experiences. So you mentioned, for instance, a candle burning underwater, and then you went on to say something that was this was like an EastEnders episode. This bit you went on to start to say something that was like going to be really fascinating about Barbara, and then the sound went. So it should have had the duff moment at that point, really.
Probably Barbara having a joke with us. I don't know. It's typical of her. Yes, it was back in about the mid-80s, I think, early to mid-80s. She was trying to buy a church because her house was subsiding and she needed large premises because she had 7 family members. So she was trying to buy this church because it was ample space and lots of room for the kids. And Slack, where the name of the little village where it was, were up in arms about it. Sort of, how dare you have a witch buying a church, even though it had been deconsecrated and so on. So there was a big hoo-ha about it, and they eventually got Cliff Richard to get behind their campaign and raise enough funds to buy it. And Barbara swore that day. She sort of said, his career is now going downhill. And shortly afterwards, he sort of went downhill a bit. And a little while after that, she was being asked, I think, by one of the newspapers about the fall through of this.
The sound's gone again, Paul.
Oh, you've gone. I'm still here.
Yeah, I can hear you now, but it went all quiet.
I don't know what's causing that. Okay. Where was I?
This meeting is being recorded.
Yes, so sorry about that, everybody. As you saw, Paul's voice and face stopped syncing, followed by no noise. So what we're going to try now is just doing the rest of the video in audio. Does that make sense? So you can hear me, I presume, Paul?
I can, yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, this has happened to me before in situations, and hopefully this will sort it out. So okay, we were Barbara bought a church. A load of local Christians didn't like it and got Cliff Richard as the big hitter behind them. So yes, carry on.
Yeah. She never actually bought the church. Like I say, she got outbid because of this campaign.
Right.
And when the press spoke to her about it afterwards, a local newspaper, they said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "Oh, I'm just going to turn into a cat and have a break from this." And no one thought anything of that. It was just her usual turn of phrase. But then she went missing in sort of Agatha Christie kind of way for several days. And up in the Yorkshire area, I can't remember where it was exactly, probably towards Scarborough or that way, there were signs of a giant cat roaming the moors there. And I asked Barbara about that. I said, I didn't have anything to do with you. And she just sort of gave me a knowing little smile and didn't say anything. Whether she turned herself into a cat, I have no idea, but she did vanish for a few days. And during that time, this strange large cat was seen over the Yorkshire moors. So make of that as you will.
Okay. So what do you make of it? I mean, are you being mischievous, or do you think that's feasible?
She was very mischievous. She had two sides for her. She got seduced a little bit by the media. And I suppose we all did in a way, being on television, radio and stuff was always a thing for her. But she got very tired of it after a while. And so she would be mischievous, and hopefully the people would leave her alone, thinking that, you know, she's just messing us about now, let's go. But they didn't. She had an enormous power which she never actually let on to the media. She had one side of her practice for the media which was much more fun, razzle dazzle stuff, you know. But on the quiet side, it was a much more serious affair. She did, for example, one of the things she was exceptionally good at. She was an exceptional tarot card reader, and she used to have people coming round all evenings of the week, basically, and they'd pay well for a tarot reader, and they would always come back, and it was totally draining her, both emotionally and physically. I mean, every time she'd done sort of like 3 or 4 readings in a night, she'd have to come into the lounge and down like a bottle of red wine just to sort of unwind. And so what she started to do then, she rose the price of tarot readings to put people off. Of course, they assumed that if she'd risen the price, she must be that good and worth it. And so it didn't work. Every time she tried to do something like that, it'd go against her. But when it came to doing the proper work, the magical work, she helped out a lot of people. She used to have people writing to her and coming around to her and asking for help. There were some terribly tragic cases. There was one guy whose name was Rafi Khan, and he was just having the worst luck in the world. He was the unluckiest man in the world syndrome. You know, he'd arranged to come and meet Barbara because everything was going against him. His world was falling apart. His family was sort of on the verge of collapse. And he turned up, and there's no sooner did he turn up, he locked himself out of his car, and it just went on and on and on. He was such a bad way. And she helped him. You know, we got back into the car without any problem. She sorted out his problems, and he was fine. And he's never looked back. He had one of these problems, which is very mundane to all of us. He was a businessman in respect that he was a door-to-door salesman, effectively, and he wasn't making money, and he had no confidence left. And she was able to sort of revitalize him and his confidence and get him back working again. And I saw him afterwards, and he'd done so well from that. He'd actually really gone up in the world because of that. Call it a psychic pep talk if you like, but that it did the job. In many ways, Barbara was like Granny Weatherwax in the Terry Pratchett novels. She was very down to earth, and she knew how to combine magic and psychology, and she was no fool in that respect, and she could manipulate people very easily. But she did have something that always worked. There was always something. I can't remember any anecdotes offhand, because whenever I see her daughters, which I still do sporadically, they always sort of go, "Oh, you remember that time when this happened?" And we all laugh and sort of say, "Yeah, that was weird, that wasn't it? Really weird, yeah." And so yeah, she was kind of weird, and that was my be all and end all of proper magic as far as I was concerned. The rituals I found in the Wiccan traditions were never quite satisfying. They were all mainly psychodrama stuff, and I was never really convinced by their power and their energy. But as Barbara used to say, you know, being a witch doesn't make you more than human; it makes you more human. And I've always stood by that, because she was always very human in every bit of work that she did, and she never tried to sort of elevate herself to something spectacular and high priestess figure.
Where do you think it comes from then, this ability, or these abilities?
I think there's many ways you could sort of think about it, but I think it personally comes from a sense of wonder you have inside you. You know, some people have that sense of wonder and that unexplainable way that they can grasp things around them. They can feel energy, and they can somehow channel it. I get it from the landscape. The landscape always speaks to me, and I think I picked up a lot of this from both working on the farm and from Barbara. When I was ill, like I say, it was about 10 years ago now. I was seriously ill in hospital in London, King's College. I had sepsis and Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I was in a really bad way because I was completely not in this world at all. I was complete delirious. I was actually put into a forced coma at one point, induced coma, because I was sort of flailing all over the place. Didn't know what I was doing or where I was. But something happened while I was there. I was having weird dreams, and the weird dreams were just weird dreams, and I couldn't patch anything on them. But somehow I was reaching out, and one girl, a guy called Alex, she picked up something in her dreams or something from me, which was a Cherokee chant. And I had been to Cherokee and had a bit of sort of a little affair with their people over there briefly. And she picked up a Cherokee chant, which you couldn't have heard anywhere else. It was Cherokee, but I have no idea where she got it from. Another person kept dreaming of the Green Man in response to me for some reason. Tallis Kimberly felt inclined to write a song, which included an additional verse, which sort of encompassed my illness as well. And it seemed that a lot of people were sort of picking up on me somehow. And when I came to, I knew I had cancer. No, I hadn't been told. I just knew it, and I was no problem with it. I just knew it. And people were very confused by everything. When I was ill, my liver virtually vanished, and when they started giving me treatment for the lymphoma, which is a very diluted form of chemotherapy, my liver suddenly recovered literally overnight. It gone from sort of on the chart, there was sort of like bilirubin there, and then just go boom, straight up. And the doctors couldn't figure that one out. And all I had to sort of explain how I knew and how I got better was that I had one sort of dream during that period where it was an alchemical journey. And in this dream, I'd found a box with a biohazard symbol on it. And I knew in this dream that box contained a cure. And in it was instructions to find various objects. And I had to go looking for an object. One of them was a fish, but every time I went to go for something, I had to question myself every step of the way. Like this particular instance was a fish, and I had to decide, did it have to be a live fish? Could it be dead? Did I have to catch it myself? Could I get it from a fisherman? And I had to go through all these phases so that I could get the correct version of that fish that I needed for the cure, and then move on to the next stage. And I think that was a kind of internal alchemy that was happening to me. And like I say, I don't think it's anything more than just that spirit inside you, which can somehow focus itself and cause things to happen. And that's what I think was happening with me.
Yes, I was going to come on to sepsis. It's a very serious kind of near-death disease, isn't it? As far as I know, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It was a strange thing. I'd been on a film location for a film called The Spirit of Albion, and I thought I'd caught the sun. It was a very hot day, very sunny, and filming at the Wilmington Longman. I felt a bit queasy afterwards, and I don't do well in the sun, so I thought, got a bit of heat stroke there, take it easy. And I seemed to get better, but I never quite got better. And then I started getting worse. And towards the end of the year, I was really going downhill. And shortly after Christmas, I was really failing. And Tallis dragged me to the doctor. I'd been to see my doctor part of a group practice, who kept giving me sleeping pills saying that you need to rest. But when Tallis got to the point where she saw I was not actually improving at all, she dragged me to the doctors, and there was another doctor there who immediately sent me to hospital there and then. So this man's not well. And it was indeed sepsis they discovered. And the first couple of nights at Brighton General, I was touch and go whether I'd survive it, but I did. They filled me with antibiotics and had various procedures that they were trying out, and they saved me. But I wasn't, even though they'd saved me at that point, I wasn't getting better. And what I think it was perhaps the lymphoma was acting with the sepsis, or vice versa. And it took them a couple of months, I think it was, before they could actually diagnose the lymphoma, because my body was in such a state of flux. I was fighting sepsis and I was fighting lymphoma and trying to stay alive, basically. So yeah, it was a serious condition. And I did actually sort of like a book here called The Gifts of Parting by an author called Penny Barham, and she included as what I told her about what had happened in this near-death experience, and she found it fascinating, and indeed put it in her little book. So yeah, it was touch and go, but I survived. Obviously.
Did it change you?
Sorry?
Did it change you, that whole experience? Did it change your life?
For me, it was a wonderful experience. It was, the people around me, it was horrific, but for me it was wonderful, because although in my delirious state I was very paranoid and hated people and couldn't trust anybody, and that lingered after I was getting better as well, but I had a real sort of bonding with all my friends and my family of friends. All my friends became family. I had a new respect, a new outlook for life and for friendship, and it became very special to sort of, you know, solidify those friendships when I was better, improve upon them. In fact, you know, there was just so much that I realized. I couldn't put it into words what I realized, but I realized I had to make a special effort with all my people that I know to be a good person. I suppose that brush with death is always something that gives you a bit of a wake-up call, but I got it in spades for sure.
Yes, yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. We were moving towards animism, which I want to move on to now, and then I diverted it off into kind of weird magic experiences and so on. But coming back to animism, that's sort of the subject, or certainly a main part of your book, isn't it? The Mountain and the Stream, yours and Tallis's book, I should say. Can you tell people who might be listening who don't really know what animism is? Can you sort of let them know what it means?
Well, there's various detailed definitions. I mean, for us, we take a more general look, which is that, you know, there's a spirituality that runs through the earth and through the trees, through the whole of nature, and we are part of that. And thus, if you can connect with the raw energies of nature, you can experience nature within yourself, which is what we've been doing. It's honoring the land, and it's appreciating the land, and it's accepting the fact that you don't own the land, you're just part of it. You are part of the land, you're part of the landscape, you're part of nature. And I think that's the easiest way of describing it, really. And you can interact with it. You know, interacting with nature, it's listening to nature. A lot of people have a lot of egos stuck in them, you know, so like, oh, I talk to the trees and this, that, and the other. And the thing you need to do is to really communicate with the land, is to be completely honest within yourself, and don't try and force any interpretations on it. Just let it come naturally. And and the land will speak to you, really. I mean, we've had experience. I had a tree close by to here. We called him Grummage. He was an old I can't remember what sort of tree he was now, but he was an old tree anyway. And I was still learning to get my feet back. I still had trouble walking after I came out of hospital. I was still having to use a stick and the like. And every day I used to walk to him. He was just across the road, across a field, and he's just there, a single tree on his own. And I sort of spent time with him, and he became a friend. This tree became a friend. I just go there every day, spend a few minutes with him, in silent communication, and it was great. I got something from it, and his name came to me. He accepted the name that I'd given him, and he was very, very rewarding for me. And he sadly died a few years ago. It was a hell of a storm up here, and the ground got so waterlogged that he fell over, and he's now quite dead. But the thing was, even though he was dead, he was full of life, because there were mosses growing on him, there were insects on him, there were plants growing around him and up his limbs and everything. So he's still very much part of the landscape, even though he's no longer alive as such. And that's what we like to think, sort of, just because you're dead doesn't mean you're finished. Everything carries on. You are all part of nature. When you're dead, you go to earth, you can come up as mushrooms or an oak tree or something. You are part of it, and you're not going to escape that. So you may as well communicate with the earth and sort of have fun with it, because it's fun.
Yeah, I think that the transmutation of energy is a very can be a very comforting way of looking at the whole sort of thing of mortality, perhaps, because I remember when my dad died, and I came out of the hospital in Arrow Park in Birkenhead, and I was standing outside, not really knowing what to do next, as you might imagine. And this couple came out with a newborn baby in their arms, and that was very comforting. That there was a cycle, rather than it was just the end of something.
Yeah, I had a very similar thing with when I was married. My wife was having our daughter, and her mother had gone into hospital for some checks at the same time that my wife would go into labour. And unfortunately, her mother slipped and broke her hip. And as my wife was going through the first pangs of labour in the ward, her mother died on the operating table. She had heart failure and then just died there. And sort of like, she died, and then a few hours later, our daughter was born. So it was a kind of weird sort of experience in that, but it did also give that transmutation idea of sort of like, her mother's gone, but hey, she come back almost immediately.
Yeah.
It is a very comforting thing, and you may as well, because it's one of those things. It's a fact. You become manure or fertilizer, and life comes from that.
Yeah. And so you wrote a book, The Mountain and the Stream. How did the book come about?
Well, when I was in Italy, I've discovered these local Stragans there, the Italian rural witches, and I saw some of their practice. I learned some of their practice, and I thought, golly, that sort of practice is very similar to the Wiccan practice of this. And so my original intention was to write a book comparing the similarities between their rural tradition and the Gardnerian or Alexandrian Wicca. But it wasn't coming together that well. There wasn't enough to hold it together as a book. And I noted all these ideas and put them away for some time, and thought, I'll go back to that. And when we moved here, it all fell into place. Tallis realized that the thing I was missing from the book and all the comparisons there was this respect, because nature's always been there in most Wiccan religions and all pagan religions. Sort of like, it's all nature based. But the thing is, so many of them don't actually get back to nature. They just do it at home. By coming up here, I got back to nature, and I realized that that's what was missing. You know, the differences or similarities between Wiccans and the Italian Strega were not that important. They were interesting, but not that important. But the important thing was that these practices were all part of the land, and perhaps some of them become disjointed. One of the Italian practices is the making of the tool, which is the ritual knife. And they do that by getting a rough piece of wood that they find, a bit of a branch or something, maybe a bit of a shape to it. And they hold it in some running water for a year. I don't mean physically hold it with the hand, obviously. They cure it in a stream or put it in a basket, something like that. And that would be the first part of their initiation, would be to sort of make their first tool. And that's very similar to the year and a day thing that the Gardnerians have. You know, they sort of say it's a year and a day between your initiation. But the thing is, although the Wiccans are symbolically doing the same thing, the Italian rural people were doing it in the actual. And I then sort of thought to myself, well, hang on, that's what's really been missing from witchcraft for me, from Wicca for me. The reason I don't think I really fell into Wicca that well was because it was all away from nature. It was all symbolic of nature, but it was never in nature. And that's what I needed. And then once I realized there was that, the book came together. Tallis helped a great deal on that. She really noticed that I was missing that thing. And then once she'd sort of said, no, you're missing the nature, you're forgetting about the land. I thought, oh yeah, that's what it is. And then the book just wrote itself, really.
That's when you know you're on the right path, really.
Yeah,
yeah.
I tried many a times to start to do it, and it's like it's not working. I wasn't happy with any of the ideas that I had.
And you've got a new book on the way.
Well, yeah, there's actually a few books coming, but the one that's coming soon is actually not our book. We've just edited it and bringing it out. But it's a book about the 20th century alchemist called Fulcanelli. And originally there was a book called The Fulcanelli Phenomenon, written by Kenneth Johnson, who used to live in Brighton. I'd written a few books, but that was his seminal volume on the subject of alchemy and Fulcanelli. And when he died, he left us his archive, much of which was sort of lots of notes and newspaper cuttings and a few things like that. But one thing amongst them was a complete book. It's another book about Fulcanelli. It's the same book, but it's been expanded and annotated. And we want to put it out there because the Fulcanelli phenomenon is no longer available, and if you can find it, it costs a lot of money. And B, we want to do it for our friend Kenny. So that's our new one that's coming up. I am doing a follow-up to The Mountain and Stream, which is going to delve in furthermore into the practices that I experienced both on the farm and in Italy, with a few anecdotes as well from sort of like the timeline, the history in between. And I'm also doing a small book on my old high priestess, Barbara Brandolano. That's a short history of my time with the Hermetic Order of the Silver Blade. Both have been started, and both are slowly coming along. And Tallis is working on another book of her own, which is it's exploring the idea of animism in alchemy. Alchemy is her forte, not mine. She's very good at alchemy. So she's going to be doing that. So we've got quite a handful on as far as work goes.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe I could talk to Tallis about that sometime. That would be interesting. Alchemy, you're talking to someone who really knows pretty much nothing about alchemy. I mean, turning base metal into gold is what I understand about alchemy, and I presume there's a bit more to it than that.
It's Yeah, I mean, there's always a philosopher's stone, legendary philosopher's stone, which allows you to live forever. Something which Falconelli, I gather, boasted about. Well, alchemy is transmutation, not strictly of base metals into gold, but it's really, when you go through all the intricacies of trying to practice alchemy, it's really a discipline which helps you transmute yourself, change yourself, bring about changes in yourself. Some alchemists who did the really heavy stuff got real transformations by inhaling too much quicksilver and things like that. But it's transformational in anything that you do. Technically, it's generally seen in the sort of chemical type thing, because that's what they tried to do back in the medieval times. They thought they could literally transform base metals into gold. But like I say, I'm no expert on alchemy either, but it's basically a transformation, not only of things around you, but yourself as well. Tallis is the one to speak to about that. She's the expert.
Right, yeah, sure, understood. Yeah. Well, as I said, I'd like to do that sometime if Tallis would be agreeable. So maybe we can sort that out. So yeah, tell me about, just to sort of finish off, really, I suppose. What's life like for you these days? What's your day like?
My days. Sometime every day there's always countryside involved. We're always out in the country at some point, even if it's just a small 20-minute walk or something. The countryside and the rural surroundings is very important to us. My usual day: get up, drink plenty of tea, switch on the computer, see what's happening in the world, if I've got emails to answer and stuff. And then quite often a lot of the stuff is research, as I start doing research into the works that I'm doing, and also for things like articles for the magazine, and other odds and ends. And I'm always planning stuff. I'm always trying to do more. I wanted to do this 30th anniversary next year. I wanted to, but like many things, I never get around to doing anything. It's just too much hard work, got too much on, too many things I've got to do to give me the time to actually arrange it. And at that point, by sheer, again, one of those weird things that happened, I get a message from Tallis Kimberley. If you remember Tallis Kimberley, the singer.
Tallis, yeah.
And she out of the blue, she messaged me and says, "I just feel so excited. I had to tell you, I've just written this cycle of songs. It's just so incredible, and it's all animistic, and it's all about nature and old rites and things like that." I said, "But I don't know where I'm going to actually perform it." And I just sort of said, "Well, I don't know. We got our 30th anniversary next year. Maybe we could do something for that." And she got really excited by that idea. And I thought, "Oh, what have I said now?" And so I went to the local art centre and had a word with them. So they've got the facilities there. It's cheap enough for us to hire. So we've hired it, and we're going to get some speakers and some tables, and Tallis is going to do her thing, and hopefully we've got another group called Chantress who might come along, who do sort of ancient chants in a sort of, I don't know, in a sort of, it's hard to describe it. It's like chant, but it's a very musical kind of rhythmic thing. And I've only seen them the once, but they're very good. They're very hypnotic, and we're hoping to get them there. Actually, have some speakers and have a lovely one-day affair here in the Peak District. So I did that, and it just came together so easily. I don't know why it came together so easily. I've always worried about trying to arrange any kind of event up here, because no one comes to the Peak District for an occult event. They all go to London. They might get as far as Nottingham, and then they shoot over to Scotland, but they seem to miss us out. So So I played with the idea on the internet, mentioned it to a few people, and there's a lot of people who just jumped up and down and said, yeah, that's great, yeah, lovely, we'll do that. So that's going to happen now. Despite my attempts at trying not to make it happen, it's going to happen.
When is it? Do you have a date?
Yeah, it's the 10th of June, Saturday the 10th of June, 2023.
Cool. Okay. And if anybody wants to buy your book or subscribe to Greenmantle, firstly, actually, just on those two things, I would really say from the heart that I find both the magazine and the book incredibly moving.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're sort of bombarded on the internet and on the telly and so on, and just sort of media in general by stuff that ultimately doesn't matter. And Greenmantle has articles about stuff that it does matter, I should say. And yeah, I just think both the book and the magazine, they really kind of address really kind of quite deep things, I suppose you might say, and kind of it is quite kind of meaning of life, if that's the way you want to take it. And thoroughly
we
recommend
we always try to stray away from that. You know, I mean, every other pagan magazine has how to read the tarot cards or how to interpret the runes and everything. And we just go out there and sort of say, well, we assume you've learned all that stuff. So let's talk about what's really going on. You know, I like to be sort of open about it and relaxed. I don't like stuff. I mean, people like Ronald Hutton write the most amazing books, but they're so academic and they're a slog to get through. They're great, but you know, it's hard work. You've got to be in that sort of academic mood to get them.
Your stuff is deliberately accessible, I think. Yeah.
You know, he can do lectures, I can do conversations, you know.
Well, yeah, quite. Yeah. That's what I hope this has been, really, you know, rather than an interview. That's my whole idea, really. It's just sort of have the kind of chat you'd have down the pub, and yeah, just sort of see where it takes you. So if people want to get hold of the book or the magazine, do they go to your website?
Yes, if you type in the search engine Greenmantle Magazine, you should come to our website and the book's available there. There are copies that turn up on Amazon, but I don't like using Amazon because it's slow and tedious, and I generally don't like Amazon on the whole. But
yeah, but people can get these things straight from you, basically.
Yeah, it's cheaper as well, actually, because Amazon take their fees and they add postage. They charge the postage, and we have to pay it.
Right. Yeah. Cool. And the same with the 30-year anniversary, I suppose. If people want to find more details, that will be, is that on the Greenmantle website, or will it be? Or...
Website's not good for the news. The best place on the internet really to find out what's going on now is to go to our Facebook page, which is Greenmantle, a pagan journal, and it's a group, and you know, you find all the info generally goes there first and foremost. We try and put it out on other sites as well, Pagan Fed and places like that. But yeah, I must admit, I'm terribly sluggish when it comes to doing stuff on both the Facebook page and the website. The website's run by a young lass called Chantel in Wiltshire, and she does it for free. She's completely voluntary, but we don't do a lot to it. We generally update it when we get a new issue out, and we just sort of, you can get the new issue here. So the magazine's always on up to date there, and you can get the book from there. But all the things that are going on outside the magazine, the publishing part, is all on the Facebook page.
Cool. Okay. I think that's probably it for me. Is there anything you would like to add, Paul?
No, I'd like to say thanks for having me. I mean, it's very strange. It's the first time I've had an interview, especially online. Yeah, it's very weird. You know, various people have been interviewed about various, you know, pagan things and the like, and despite the fact that we got quite a following because of the book, we got some fans out there, and no one has ever bothered to sort of say, "Oh, can we do an interview about your book?" No, but we did have quite a few invitations to speak, and I like speaking, but I prefer to sort of not go down the route of it being a sort of lecture. I like to sort of get myself involved with the audience. But we had, like I say, we had a guy in Kent, a lovely guy called Brian Dennis, and he was like a walking advert for the book. He loved our book, and he kept plugging it every time I mentioned it. He'd share it everywhere, and he invited us down to Kent. He said, "Come, please talk to us. We'd love to hear you talk." And we got in touch with Mike Steigel, who was the ex-president of the Pagan Federation. He lives in Kent, not far from there. And he said, "Oh, I'll be happy to put you up if you want to come down." So we said, "All right, we'll go down." And we did a talk in Chislehurst Caves. And
Blimey, I used to live about 2 miles from there. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We did a talk there, and like I say, Brian Dennis, the guy who wants us there, was so overwhelmed by it. It's I almost expect him to bow down before me. It's like, "Stop it, you're a great advert, but don't." And they're lovely people, and we had the same in America. We were in America, and we did a talk there in Asheville, and they were lovely too, because Tallis will tell you, when I start talking at an event like that, I sort of go off script almost immediately, and then start talking to them as people, as a conversation, and I love doing that. And so I don't get that many chances to do that, so it's great to be here to sort of talk to someone like you about it, especially someone I've known for so long, and I know is a pertinent question asker.
Well, I hope so, if I haven't gone off piste too much, sort of thing. Yeah, no, I think it's been an absolute pleasure. It's really I'm trying to talk to people who live fascinating lives, and I think everything you've had to say is fascinating, truthfully. I'm sure we could probably go on for a couple more hours,
Oh, I dare say we could.
Yeah.
Like I say, I'd be rambling away like I always do, as Tallis would say.
No, it's been really fascinating, because this stuff is fascinating. I think there is one phrase that I would really pick up on, in terms of what you talked about, really, was a sense of wonder, and I remember the Waterboys used that line in some song. I think Mike Scott's a really interesting guy on these kind of subjects as well, and that sense of wonder, I think, is what pervades all this stuff, is what pervades all the stuff we're talking about, really. That there is a sort of magic in life that it's too easy to lose.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking today about the state of the world, basically, and how the environment is suffering. And I sort of said, the problem is sort of, we lose our sense of wonder when we get too much technology, and we move away from the things we knew, and we're just reliant on the things we've learnt. And yet you go to sort of like the Amazon or wherever, you find some hidden tribe there, and they've been going for thousands of years without any problem, quite happy living in the jungle. And so that's the problem we've got. They're still happy with the land. They're still at one with the nature around them and the immediate environment. And we're not. We keep moving away from it. And that's why I think we have so much trouble with the environment, because too many people are greedy, and too many people are quick to exploit everything just for a few pounds.
Yeah,
and
for the perceived happiness, a few pounds
right anymore.
Yeah.
People are talking about, "Oh, how am I going to pay the bills?" And it's sort of like, yeah, I know it's bad, but hey, get out into the countryside, go for a nice walk. It's lovely. Take all that pressure off you a bit, even if it's only for a couple of hours, it'll help.
I saw, ironically enough, I saw a meme on Facebook saying it's impossible to be unhappy in the countryside.
Yeah. I mean, I have worries. I mean, obviously the current problem with the energy bills rising. I mean, mine has pretty much quadrupled my direct debit, and it's frightening to think that, my God, where am I going to get this money from? But I still remain positive, because I get out there, I see the hills, I see the valleys, see the trees, and it's sort of like, yeah, well, if push comes to shove, I could live in one of those caves there, or I could live in that wood. You just get that feeling that you could do that. If push came to shove, you could do it. And I think I could,
It's
I've
the
done
mental
work.
space it gives you as much as anything, isn't it? Really thinking, okay, all is not lost, because all of this stuff
Yeah.
about cost of living and bills and all that kind of thing, it's ultimately a bit of an illusion. It may not feel like that if you get hit
No,
for a bill, and if you get hit by debt collectors or whatever, but the higher truth, I think, and I hope
yeah,
that doesn't sound too glib, because I'm a bit worried that it does as I'm saying it, but the higher truth, is that we are born for different purposes than feeding the energy companies, perhaps.
yeah, and I've always said the bottom line is, if something bad's going to happen, you're going to get bailiffs coming round or whatever, and debt collectors. It's sort of like, there's not a lot you can do about it. So think about what is good that you could do, to sort of alleviate it. I mean, you're not going to be able to get money out of thin air to pay your bills, but you can at least sort of go, right, well, once the debt collectors have been and done their thing, there's not a lot else they can do. I just have to sort of live with that. And what's going to make living with that brighter, a bit of a nicer environment, a world where you can go for a walk in the countryside and really experience what it's like to be peaceful. That's one thing I always find from the countryside, is peace and peace of mind. Nothing can really spoil that. Yeah, you have to go back to the problems, but you can always go for another walk later.
Yeah, they can't take I say they can't take the countryside away.
No.
Whilst we've got it, we should appreciate it, certainly.
Yeah, and we're always there rooting for people who sort of, we were a bit concerned during lockdown, when people were trying to get out into the countryside when they could, and they were flooding the Peak District, and they were leaving barbecues on moorland and starting moorland fires and everything. It was a bit sort of, I wish these people wouldn't come into the country, but I know that even though they can be complete arseholes like that, they are appreciating it. At least, they're enjoying it. I just wish they would take a bit more care with it. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Paul, we should do this again. I've really enjoyed it.
Time.
I've really enjoyed it.
Possibly Thursday or Friday this week. But
I'm booked up for a couple of weeks, but I think we should definitely do a part 2. And I would also like to talk to Tallis quite a lot as well.
Well, next time I'll
that.
tie it along and hopefully get a better connection so you can see us and hear us.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And can you stay on the line after I kind of cut this off, and we can have a chat?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I'll round this up now by thanking you, the listener, for listening, and thanking you, Paul, for giving an absolutely fascinating chat about stuff that I think a lot of people find really interesting. And it's good to hear it from sort of somebody who's pretty kind of been involved for an awful long time, and in a very honest way, I think. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, cheers, Paul. Bye-bye.